Good morning, everybody. My name is Anthony Maldonado, the programs coordinator here at the Corona Chamber, and I would like to welcome you to today's business briefing. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for being here, as well as for those listening at the later time on our YouTube channel. Please consider subscribing and getting all of our legislative updates. We have some really great things that we are doing, and we want you to stay up to date. So again, like I mentioned, we are very excited for you to join us today. But before we jump into our legislative report, I would like to thank our sponsor. Today's event is sponsored by On-Site Computing. On-Site Computing provides IT services to small and medium businesses in California and remote cloud services to business throughout North America and Asia. Their goal is to help businesses use technology to run more efficiently, become more competitive, and better serve their customers. Thank you, On-Site Computing, for sponsoring this meeting. Also, I wanted to remind you that there is a chat button down below. Send your questions to the chamber host, me, and I will verbally ask the questions at the appropriate time to our legislative advocate, Jeff Gibson. Now, before we jump into our chamber announcements, I wanted to pass it over to our Chamber Board Chair, Paul Bender-Badesha, for a update. Paul Bender?
Good morning, everybody. So nice to see most of you. I know some of you have your videos off, secretive people, but just wanted to thank you for joining the call. Anthony, did we talk about Washington, D.C. last week?
We did. We had Mike Karashi as well as Chad Miller jump on, and they gave a few updates about DC.
That's fabulous. So continuing on that theme, the reason we have these calls every week, as you know, is that we can stay up to speed with some of the myriad of legislation that's coming out, not only from federal government, but also mostly for us from the state of California. And I had forgotten to check, and I just found out that COVID pay was extended. The supplemental sick leave has been extended. It was signed in on September the 29th, and it's been extended to the end of December, which is a real bummer because for us, it really affects our margin. I've been paying out about $2,000 or $3,000 a week on that. And we know that it's not as big of the numbers are much, much lower than they were before. However, you know, we have to pay it out even if someone has a sore throat and they think they might have COVID. And there's you probably got colleagues that have colds and flu right now. We're seeing it in our office. So it's such, I'm going to use an unprofessional word. It's a bit of a bummer because we're seeing a slowdown in my business because our company clients have become cautious and they are laying off people and they are cancelling job orders. So that's been really tough, actually. And I think the fourth quarter, we're really going to begin to see some of the changes and the challenges that are happening across the world and in other economies. So on that note, we really have to work together as a business community or as a local geographical community to support each other's businesses, because when times get tough, it's difficult. You think back to previous recessions and how lonely and isolated we can feel. I really want to encourage you to join in these calls, but also to come to Good Morning Corona, but also to come to our legislative dinner. We can only fight on your behalf and find information. I think I'm pretty well read, but I can't keep up to date with all the legislation that's coming out all the time. So I rely upon the Corona Chamber to decipher it into simple language for me. So we have a lovely dinner in Conrad and Jill Padilla's home on Thursday. God, I lost my brain, October the 20th, night before Good Morning Corona. Now we have sponsorships at various levels. I'll be there, I'm sponsoring. And thank you, Anthony. Sheriff Chad Bianco, the District Attorney Mike Estrin and Supervisor Karen Spiegel will be there. It's your chance not only to have some exclusive meet and greet time with them, but the bigger purpose of this is to build up our funds so that we can fight legislation and support legislation too, because much of it also is beneficial as we go into 2023. We really need your support. The Chamber does not get any funds from anywhere else. We have a small contract with the city of Corona, but most of our money comes from 90% comes from members, and we rely upon you to support our legislative efforts. I look forward to seeing you there. If you have any questions about it, reach out to Anthony or myself. Would be happy to give you further information. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Anthony.
So much, Paul Bender. And with that, I just wanted to touch on one other event that we have coming up, and that is tomorrow morning, our Coffee with an Entrepreneur program. We will be featuring guest speakers Lonnie and Mary Scott. Lonnie and Mary are the owners of Bobcat Property Farms here in the foothills of Corona. You've probably seen them around the city and at local farmers markets, but now's your chance to really hear their story of how Bobcat Property Farms got started and how they continue to grow and win awards for their amazing honey. So register now by clicking the link that I will post in the chat, or simply stop by tomorrow at the Chamber at 8 a.m. And with that, I wanted to go ahead and jump right into our legislative report with Jeff Gibson. Jeff Gibson is our legislative advocate. He keeps up with all of the movement happening locally, regionally, statewide, and federally. With Jeff's thorough analysis, he helps us act timely on projects and initiatives that help make a difference in shaping our community. As owner of Occidental Communications Group, his knowledge of complex political issues and the great relationship he has built in to ensure the Corona Chamber has all the tools to be effective on behalf of the business community. So please help me welcome Jeff Gibson to share his legislative update. Jeff?
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate it. Each year at this time, we get into our report card. We're going to be doing this over 2 weeks because we covered so much legislation this year, and we want to be able to really get into how each bill ended up. So by our current standard, and the standard that's used by the California Chamber and the state of California legislative analysts, we saved you and every employer in the Corona community over $51,430 per employee. So that's not $51,430 per business. That would be the net cost if these pieces of legislation that we're about to discuss were passed. And we've broken it out by who voted for what and what we did on it. And so let's just jump right in. AB 2840, which we have spoken about, targeted the Inland Empire for the elimination basically of new manufacturing and logistics businesses. And by the way, in that bill, if manufacturers or logistics centers changed their use, or say needed to add a sprinkler system, or had another requirement brought on by a government, like electrification, for instance, that it would need to go before a public agency, which is not unusual if you're running a manufacturer or you're continually coordinating with the city. Then you would actually you would then fall under the bill, which requires you to be more than 1,000 feet away from any building that serves the public. So if you think of that, those are restaurants, it's pretty much anywhere within an urban grid. And so there were a number of different issues. We here in Corona, in this chamber, produced basically about 40% of the stories that the legislature heard in person. So that was a big win for us. It's a savings of about, and this is an estimate, of about $1,740 per employee, because if think of what would have happened to Amazon shipping, any logistics that you as a business are, if you receive a package at your home, if you receive a package at your business, think of what you would be charged if your most local UPS location were in Trona, or if it were outside of Hesperia, and that would be the area that would be covered for you. That was what this bill was looking at doing. So it's impossible to really say what the bottom line impact is, but a fair market estimate was $1,740 per. The status is it was killed in the Senate Local Governance and Finance Committee, and Assemblymember Cervantes voted yes. Senator Roth did not have an opportunity to vote on the bill. So moving on, AB 1395 required California to be carbon neutral by 2045. The estimate within the legislative analyst report is $4,170 per employee. That bill is dead. That was part of the governor's plan in the final weeks that we spent a lot of time on. The governor announced 5 major pieces to his climate plan. The legislature itself decided that they did not want to take this bill before both houses, and so it died. That climate plan, as we have discussed, does not use all of the technologies available. In fact, only uses a handful of the technologies available that would be considered carbon neutral, or would move us even closer to being carbon neutral. We'll discuss that in the next slide. But that was a $4,170 per person impact. A bill that we lost was SB 1162, which requires employers over 100, with over 100 employees, to report their pay across demographics that cannot be legally used or tracked to determine pay levels. So this puts a number of employers in a more than a double jeopardy situation, because the you have to follow, and Paul Binder can speak to this as well, and each of you as business owners can speak to this. You cannot be giving people pay based upon any of their demographics. You have to be making those pay decisions, and there's a long tradition. There's just so many different decisions that we've made as a culture, as a society, as a community, as a state, both legally, through legislation, through court decisions, that are specifically designed to have people paid for their work, not who they are, not what their background is, not what their personal decisions are. And we all agree that that was the way to do this. The legislature now rolled that back. It is already being set up for a lawsuit to try and get employers to break out their pay for employees based upon all of those decisions. The sole purpose of this bill was to give the opportunity to the public to create what are known as PAGA lawsuits. PAGA is the Private Attorney General action, which essentially means that if you get angry at a business, even if you're driving past it and have no interaction with that business at all, that you as a private attorney general could sue the business. Currently, wage PAGA actions cost California businesses over $2 billion last year. And many of you may have been caught in those, unfortunately. So that's one that we lost, but you're going to be hearing more about that. Now looking at going on to AB 2133, it's another one of the governors, and it's extremely difficult in the closing days it's extremely difficult for the legislature, for businesses to lobby against something that the governor has announced that he would sign. he or she would sign. That's just a fact of the matter. You could think about it yourself, probably makes sense. And the governor announcing very close to the end of the legislature that he was going to be backing 5 different pieces of environmental legislation, gave each of these a leg up. But the second win that we had here was AB 2133, which was called the Global Warming Solutions Act, which was going to cut California emissions by 55%, by an additional 55% by 2030, as measured by the estimated amount of carbon that was produced in the California economy in 1990. Now, if you've been working with us for a while, you know that the state of California is well ahead of all of its climate goals, in large part because we have switched a lot of our energy production into to natural gas. Roughly 46% of our basically 5 out of every 10 electrons that are powering everything that you are using right now to be a part of this Zoom call come from natural gas. And because of that, we are 40% below the carbon that we produce, the net carbon that we produced in 1990. The state has decided that natural gas is, and I know Leah's on the call, but and so we'll get into this in the next slide a little bit, has decided that natural gas is not part of their global warming solutions. The bill itself is so old that we don't refer to global warming anymore. We refer to it as climate change. But because it was passed originally in 2005, that's what this has to do. The net cost, again, to employers was $4,170 per employee. It is dead. Senator Roth voted yes to move it from the Senate to the Assembly. Assembly member Cervantes did not have a vote recorded when the bill did not come up for consideration on the Assembly. So it was an important bill to deal with and demand better from our legislature. If we are going to continue to work on climate change, and clearly as a state there's an interest to do so, we need to do so in a way that uses all available technology as opposed to cherry picking the winners. Moving on, we're going to look at single payer healthcare, which was this year was ACA 11, along with a number of other proposals. There were a variety of policies and regulations. Again, the governor had backed a number of them. And then slowly started to back away as the revenue numbers were coming in for the state, which were showing that we are, at the time, we're headed towards a potential deficit. We are now in a structural deficit as a state. I know that happened very quickly because we were talking in May about $127 billion surplus, and a number of folks thought we were jumping the gun by saying we were going to likely be in deficit, but we now have a structural deficit on the revenue categories. Already only 2 months into the state legislative year, $4.5 billion. So this is going to be something that we're going to be dealing with for quite some time. This bill, if passed, would have been $35,100 per employee. And that is from the California Legislative Analyst. The analyst is a nonpartisan organization hired by the Senate and Assembly leadership to analyze every bill. They are very highly thought of, and their most conservative estimates were that it would add $400 to $600 billion to the state budget, which right now is running about $170 billion. So very big bill, took a lot of work early in the session. Then moving on to finally for today, AB 2438, which would have immediately eliminated over 50% of the approved state road projects, including several in the city of Corona, in and around our community. It would have cost each employer $6,250 per employee per year in lost traffic and a number of different dislocations. It was vetoed by the governor. Both Senator Roth and Assemblymember Cervantes did not vote on the bill. So in any case, happy to answer any questions that you may have, or we can move on if I have stunned you into silence.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I do believe you have stunned us into silence because we have no questions as of yet. So feel free to move on to the next slide.
Okay, next slide. So 2 questions have come up. One, the governor spent a good deal of time this week talking about rising gas prices and his plan to increase gas taxes to fight gas prices. And so a little history on how we got here. So the state of California has the 8th largest refining capacity, because state restrictions actually increase the profitability of refining gasoline and refining of petroleum products in California by 50 times over what can be found in other states, because it takes so much to refine our gas. We typically have a very, very tight market of just a couple of weeks of supply, and especially at the end of summer and at the end of winter, because there's a number of state orders that require that we have a summer blend and a winter blend of gasoline. And so while the rest of the world is seeing gas prices go down by about $2 per gallon, California is seeing gas prices go up by $2 a gallon. I have seen $7.29 throughout LA County for an average, which is just eye-watering, and there's very little that you can say about it that the price itself does not already say. But here are the structural reasons that have been reported, and we can discuss those. So some of the refineries that are in California and are approved, and remember, you have to go through the Cal EPA process of having your refinery approved to even make gasoline. So you can imagine that is not a easy thing to get through. Those refineries are down on scheduled maintenance that was scheduled with the state. So the state knew that this problem was going to be coming. Secondly, as we've discussed, summer blend, it cannot be made after the middle of October, and winter blend is supposed to be made after the middle of October. I believe the date is October 15th or thereabouts. Well, you can imagine that they cannot just flip a switch and get summer blend and on one day and winter blend on the other day. You have to clean everything out, go through the system, and then go back into production. So this is not a short period of time in which you're dealing with. There have been other spikes in October and around March that we've gone through as a state, not as pronounced as $2 per gallon, but we have had them. And then thirdly, the thing that we have not been faced with as a state is, as of July 1, our gas tax is approximately 61 cents per gallon. And then we have climate fees per gallon of 84 cents. So if you think about that, even if we were being charged nothing or if we were being charged the average minus taxes of what someone in Nevada or to the east of us pays, we still would be facing $5 per gallon at the pump because of the state and climate taxes. So there are a number of reasons that this is going on. The governor has proposed an 18 to 25% tax on oil companies that are still producing in California to form a refund for certain residents. But that has not been introduced in the legislature, as the legislature is out of session and will not be back until December 5th. So happy to discuss that, or we can move on to the second question, which has also garnered international attention, which is how much more energy will California need to be fully renewable by 2035? Anthony, do we have any questions on the first one?
We did have one question that came through, and it was just a clarifying point.
Sure.
Is that correct that the combination of taxes and climate fees is $1.45 per gallon?
Yes. And I went on the low end of the estimate. On a moment-to-moment basis, the California Air Resources Board can change that climate fee up or down. Now they've never, but yes, that is, we pay about $1.45 in local climate fee and gas taxes.
Thank you, Jeff. You can move on.
So how much energy will California need to be renewable by 2035? Many of you may have seen Toyota Motor Company CEO, Akio Toyoda, with a D, not a T. His comments that it's almost structurally impossible for California to be renewable by 2035 with 37 million cars on the road and 1.8 million long-haul trucks. So decided to dig into this a little bit, dig into the comments from Toyota, and as backed with federal figures. So California last month on September 6th had the maximum electricity load that has ever been measured. That was 52,400 megawatts, roughly 5% higher than the 2002 our previous peak. So you can see peaks generally are not reached very often. They do hover in the 48,000, 44,000. They don't really drop all that much, but that was the peak. And so by the numbers, to be fully renewable by 2035, we would have to replace 60%. So 6 out of every 10 electrons used to participate in this call would have to be replaced, because those are either generated by natural gas, which is about 46%. About 9% comes from nuclear, which would have to be replaced. And the balance of that, about 5%, comes from coal. So we have substantially increased our coal energy buying. We've talked about that before. We have contracted with plants in Texas, in Utah specifically, to produce that energy. And so 60% of our energy production would have to be replaced. Now, on top of that, 32% of our energy, which is now imported, would have to be brought back into the state. So while we are finding 6 out of 10 electrons to be produced in the state using technology that is certified as renewable under state guidelines, we would also have to provide 32% additional resources production within the state, because you cannot be renewable if you are importing. So if we want to be renewable and self-sufficient, then 1 out of every 3 electrons used here would have to be brought back into the state. And then on top of that, because of the much wider use of electricity, we would have to increase, according to the CAISO, which is the independent system operator, we would have to increase energy production by 30%. So if you add up 60 and 32 and 30 and drop out some regular, some of the overlap within those, you are extremely close to having to double our production of energy in California. Now, the electrical grid, before we can even get into how you would do that, the electrical grid would obviously need to be expanded, because grids are built to operate between 95 and 105% capacity, regular capacity in any given time. So we don't have the physical capacity within the grid. I'm not saying that this is not going to happen. I'm not saying that this should not happen. I'm saying that there is going to have to be a large scale effort that has yet to be undertaken. We have 13 years to do this, and actually about 12 now. In 12 years, it took us 150 years to build the grid that we have now with the level of renewability and et cetera. And we have 12 years to essentially double that capacity, only using renewable energy. So this is going to be very interesting. There are likely going to be a lot of different costs and dislocations that you as an employer are going to be facing. We will be tracking those for you, and happy to lead discussions and answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Jeff. There are no questions at this time.
Wow. Stunned everybody into silence. Sorry, guys.
Yes, definitely. Not the best news, but we will definitely move forward with everything. So it's going to be good.
We will keep at it, and we appreciate your support, and talk to everybody very soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. And then just to touch on, I know we have legislation, the legislature is closed right now. However, if you need to reach your local representatives at any time, please find their contact information on the screen, and their representatives as well as themselves are very happy to help you. And with that, I wanted to thank today's sponsor once more, On-Site Computing. They provide the tools to meet every aspect of your technology needs and help businesses to not only cut costs, but also increase productivity through efficient processes. Learn more at onsitecomputing.net. And with that, I want to thank you all for joining us this week. And next week we will be back. Jeff Miller will be joining us again, as well as Bobby. So we should be back to our regular scheduled program with those two attending as well. So again, thank you all so much for attending, and I will see you next week. Meeting is adjourned.